And I think at first the Democrats thought that let's just run on our record. People like Mark Warner, people like Tim Kaine. We're the best managed state in the country. We're the best state to do business. We're the best state to raise a kid. Why in the world would anyone want to change? Let's run that way. As you know, in 2005, Tim Kaine, he ran as Mark Warner's younger brother. Right? So pre-Deeds, he said, well, I'll be their country cousin. That's what I'll do. I will run on the same basis that Kaine and Warner ran. And that'll be successful. Secondly, he said, I'll run on the best. We've been the best. Why in the world do we want to change this? And so he thought this was going to be a pretty easy election conceptually. But it got very challenging and very difficult for him pretty quickly. A couple of things happened. One was that Governor Kaine took a night job. He became the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And the difference for that was, what changed about that is that it linked Tim Kaine very explicitly to the national Democrats and the national policies. His job now was, in the daytime, he was governor of all Virginians. In the evening, his job was to defend each and every policy initiative that came forward out of the Democrats in Washington, whether it be cap and trade or card check or anything, or health care. That was his job. If Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid passed it, or Barack Obama wanted it, Kaine said he had to defend it. And Deeds was uncomfortable with that. He didn't quite know what to say about all these national things. So he then decided that he wouldn't run on the Warner-Kaine legacy, he'd run on the Warner legacy. He'd be a Warner Democrat. And then secondly, Deeds always had a challenge in this race in thinking about how to relate to President Obama and his agenda. And here was the difficulty that Deeds had. On one hand, Obama was absolutely needed for the race for the Democrats, because nobody energizes and mobilizes the Democratic base better than Barack Obama. At the same time, Deeds was looking at some of these numbers that said the Democratic policies at the national level were not so popular in Virginia. Whether it be cap and trade out in coal country, or health care, or the manner in which card check was making the business community more wary about the Democrats in the state. And so Deeds had to try to find a way to finesse that issue. And I'm going to say in a moment, I don't think he was very successful at that. That how does he manage to do this? And in fact, far from being successful, he was woefully unsuccessful. He lost all the independents, and he demobilized the Democratic base simultaneously. That's not too easy to do that at the same time, but he did it. He was faced with a challenge, and he wasn't able to kind of succeed. On the other side, we had Bob McDonnell. And McDonnell basically thought from the get-go that what he had to do were a couple of things. First, he had to rebrand the Republican Party. The Republican Party for years had been known in the public's mind as the party of no. They obstruct this, they say no to this, no to that, and they weren't forward-thinking and positive. McDonnell said, far from that being that, I need to come up with plans and ideas about how to deal with every problem. So if you mentioned a problem in Virginia, McDonnell pulled out a paper showing you how he'd solve it. I got a plan for this, a plan for that, a plan for that. And probably the most dramatic instance of that was Republicans had been labeled obstructionist on transportation. McDonnell said, I have a plan to get $1.4 billion with 12 different sources of revenue. And a lot of Democrats complained about that plan bitterly. They said, this money will never materialize. They said he has offshore drilling revenues in there. That he has $500 million from the ABC store. He has tolls on the North Carolina border. These monies may or may never materialize. But in some ways, it didn't matter that much because he had what? Had a plan. In September, I met with a high-ranking official in the Deeds campaign. And he told me this. He said, if you take a look at the transportation issue, he said, Bob McDonnell's plan is a D-. He says it has all sorts of revenues that will never come to fruition. He says, we have no plan. And he said that in the end of the day, D- trumps nothing. And he said that it's killing us, the fact that we're there. So McDonnell, on that hand, basically said he had a plan, and he did this throughout the campaign. He was very effective at redefining the Republican Party as a party of problem solvers rather than a party of obstructionists. He did very well. Secondly, McDonnell capitalized very well on the national environment, the altered environment, while the Democrats had trouble adjusting. That McDonnell continually raised these issues about where are you on card check, where are you on cap and trade, and always Deeds' response was, these are not state issues. They're national issues. They don't affect, we're going to have to respond to whatever the federal government does. It doesn't matter what we think or say. But one of the groups that it mattered to very much was the Virginia business community. And they shifted from largely supporting the Democrats like they had with Warner Kane over to supporting Bob McDonnell, both financially and with other efforts as well. And so McDonnell was able to effect a major shift in the coalitions in Virginia, moving the business community away from the kind of Mark Warner Democrat back to the Republicans based on these national issues. Thirdly, Bob McDonnell did a very good job of what I call damage control when he was faced with adversity. And the biggest issue came because the Deeds campaign really thought they were going to try to define McDonnell as a fringe candidate, as somebody who was outside the Virginia mainstream. And the most clearest indicator of this came about when the Washington Post wrote this article looking back at Bob McDonnell's master's thesis that he wrote in the 1980s. And many of you may know, this has now become the most famous master's thesis written in the history of Virginia on that front. And McDonnell responded to it very effectively. He responded immediately. He basically disowned some of the more egregious comments in the thesis, but at the same time, basically said he was going to keep his focus on the issues that mattered to Virginia. And he came up with some ads that responded to this. One, of course, with a member of his own family. Right? He said, if you think I don't like working women, or you think I believe women should be in the home, take a look at my daughter. Right? Here she is, she's working for a software company now. And previously, she was a platoon commander in Iraq. And that was an extraordinarily powerful ad. Because, not every, if you think women ought to be home, it's hard to believe that you send your daughter to Iraq on that front. And so McDonnell responded, I think, very effectively to the arguments that were made. And in fact, it harmed Deeds. Because at the end, Deeds seemed to continue to harp on this issue when people really wanted to see what plans Deeds had.